In this episode, I speak with Jana Pittman, who shares her inspiring journey from an elite athlete to passionate advocate for women's health and entry into medicine, specialising in obstetrics and gynecology, whilst raising 6 children now as a solo mother. Discover how her personal setbacks fueled her purpose and the powerful lessons of resilience and determination reinforced by her own upbringing of strong family values, hard workers and high achievers. This is an uplifting conversation, one that encourages self-advocacy around women's health issues, including menopause. It also invites balance and self-compassion around the role of parent, whilst juggling career and ambition. When I asked the question, if you had the ability to give every mother in the world a gift that she could not buy, what would you like that to be? Jana responded, personal time and a magic glass of wine that took her mother guilt away. Enjoy this episode. Jana, I'm so glad to have you on the podcast. Thank you for making the time. I'm sure we're going to go into many achievements that you've had, but I'd just like to circle back to maybe the younger version of Jana through childhood and your teenage years. Can you give me a little bit of insight into that part of your life?
Oh, look, my life has always been a bit chaotic and busy, right from the time I was born, to be honest. But I come from a family of hard workers who always do multiple things at once. And therefore, I think we've always sort of probably bitten off a little more that we can chew throughout life. And I guess that's sort of held me in good stead as I've grown up. But it was always sports and family and academics and weekend activities with friends. So it's always been a very busy and quite hectic space.
Sounds quite full though and beautiful. Where did you grow up, in Sydney?
Yeah, I
Or
grew up in a little hobby farm in what is now Bella Vista, but back then was all no street lights and dirt roads. But these days, it's hard to believe there was ever any acreage where I grew up. But it was a very peaceful life, a very centered life around our family and our what I guess what we loved, which was spending time together and learning from each other, which was always wonderful. Mum was always a huge support for me right from the beginning. Dad was the hardest worker I've ever known, so I guess you grow up with very good morals when you have two people that have such a big influence over you.
such a good heritage. Now, a lot of people are going to know you as the elite athlete that you are, the Olympic champion, and also the gold medals that you won at the Commonwealth Games. But can you maybe give us a little bit more insight into that part of your life in terms of what were the wins and inspirations? But perhaps, if you're comfortable to do so, what were also maybe the personal struggles and challenges of that time as well?
Yeah, look, I mean, that's an interesting one because everyone knows you for all the medals you win, but they forget the ones you lost. And yes, I've been very lucky. I've won multiple world titles and 4 Commonwealth gold medals, but I actually never won the Olympic Games. And so people assume that that is part of my history because I'm quite a well-known Australian athlete. And don't get me wrong, I should have. I went into 3 Olympic Games as the reigning world champion, and one of the particular races leading into Athens, I was undefeated that entire season. So it was a bit of shock to all of us that I didn't bring home the gold medal. And it's been a personal struggle to look at that situation and go, well, what happened and how much was I responsible for? And a lot of self-doubt around whether you sabotage your training and your program and things like that. And the long and short of it was that there was nothing that we did. We did everything as to the best of our ability. It was a lot of bad luck. And I got very badly injured 3 times in a row within weeks of those championships. So it wasn't to do with, rocking up to the race and not performing on the day. It was physical almost disability that unfortunately didn't take on the goals we'd set out for it. But it's funny at the time you don't know that because all you think about is the disappointment of all the years and decades of dedication that went into trying to win an Olympic gold medal. And you sometimes forget how lucky you were to win Commonwealth and world champs and travel around the world competing for decades for your country. And it was an amazing chapter of my life. But if it wasn't for the fact that I lost the Olympics, I wouldn't be a doctor that I am now. And people go, what? How does that work? And it all came about that after the London Olympics, my 3rd Olympics in a row that I was supposed to win and lost due to injury, I was sitting there with my amazing mother, who is the hero in my world, and I was sitting there thinking, well, what do I do now? But I was carrying such heavy disappointment from my sports career that it could have gone either way. It could have gone I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to be safe. I'm going to go into coaching or stay in media because they're safe options. But my mother inspired me to push beyond my boundaries and apply for medical school, which was something I'd ever wanted to do since I was a child. And she intimated that, well, if you take on something so enormous and so hard and so difficult, it'll wipe away some of that disappointment from the Olympic sport. Because let's be really honest, she said, you'd always wanted to be a doctor, and the Olympics was never something you wanted. It just happened to come about because you were running pretty fast. So imagine how wonderful it would feel if you crossed that stage one day on your graduation day as Dr. Jana Pittman, and how that would change the disappointment of the sport. And so I can wholeheartedly say now that if I had have won the Olympics, I can almost certainly tell you I wouldn't have been a doctor. And the career that I have now, working with women in the postpartum space and in the birthing environment and with gynecological cancers and women's health awareness and that sort of advocacy space that I do so much of, would not have happened. And so I think it's a wonderful message, because so often we look at our failures as something that holds us back and tells us we can't do something, when I wholeheartedly believe it's the fuel you need to take on something even more exciting if you're just open to that opportunity.
I love to hear that. I think, I guess in your area of work, it is kind of the expected thing that you'll go into coaching or maybe a presenter
Exactly.
role.
Yeah.
But isn't that's so amazing that you can take something that I guess was not an easy time in your life, but use that as the fire in your belly to go
100%.
on to do things that maybe other people wouldn't have dreamed for you, and you might not have thought you've done yourself. So that's a wonderful story, and it really just shows also the complexity, doesn't it, and the capacity of women to use their experiences in life to fuel them and to give them the desire, their deeper why, I guess, into choosing their passions
That's
and their
right.
dreams.
It,
Yeah.
it,
So
it continued from that as well, because obviously, naturally, sports medicine would have been the uh, most common pathway after all the sport that I did. But I really felt like my calling was in women's health, largely because I, post sport, had lots of miscarriages and I had problems with incontinence after birth. I had endometriosis, and I've had chronic pain, and then I've had heavy menstrual bleeding, and lots of things that are actually really tricky to work through as a woman. And then obviously I had a positive pap smear and had to have multiple surgeries on my cervix to make sure that I didn't that it didn't develop into cancer. Thankfully, never did. So there was a lot of calling and a lot of things that would rock most people's world. But to me, exactly like you said, it I think it was almost the indicator or the flag saying, hey, you need to become a gynecologist and obstetrician so that you can work in this space. But had I not gone through those experiences, I probably would be, an orthopedic surgeon by now. So it's
yeah,
one of those, I really do think that we need to have a totally different approach to things that don't go to plan, because often they are where we as women thrive, because when we've had our own personal experience, we're so much better helping others through that same space.
absolutely. Yeah. So tell us about your journey into becoming a mother. What brought you into motherhood?
Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, I have 6 children, so there's multiple different journeys in that space. The first one, I always knew I wanted to have lots of children. So that's sort of right since I was a small person. I knew I wanted to be a doctor, and I wanted to have lots of kids. So I got married quite young, well, these days quite young. I know, our parents' generation all got married at 20. But I was married by the time I was 22, and I had my first baby at 23. And that was always planned. We got married and started for a child straight away. And unfortunately, that marriage ended with only one child and multiple miscarriages. So I then actually really couldn't take on the idea of being remarried early. I really loved my first husband and found that a very tricky chapter to close. So eventually, had 2 children on my own. As a solo parent with my mum as my support system, using a sperm donor. So that was my 2 middle children. And then another chapter rolled around, and I met Paul, who we are separated now, but he was my husband for several years and still my best friend. We hang out and spend a lot of time together. We're still married, probably never get divorced, but it's one of those where wonderful friends that just can't live under the same roof. And we had our final 3 children together. So I'm very lucky that I have 6 beautiful children. And I also donated 2 eggs to 2 other families. So theoretically, I have 8 biological, but only 6 that are mine.
So powerful, amazing.
It's very
And women,
different.
they're all very different. So,
Mm.
what great insights you give to so many women on all those different levels. Was it, how did you feel kind of juggling the role of your ambition, your career, and motherhood? There's a lot of women that will think that they need to choose. They need to choose one or the other and can't have both. What would you say to that?
Oh, it's a really tricky one, and I do a lot of events in this space. And I think the biggest thing is to leave the judgment at the door. For some people, motherhood is their number one priority, and don't get me wrong, it's the thing that I think about most with my ambition and with the job choices that I've made and the impact on my children. And my sister-in-law is a stay-at-home mum. She's just started going back to work a little bit part-time at the moment, but that's when her children started school. So for her number one role in life was to be the primary caregiver at all times for her children. And I look at her with such admiration, and think, wow, what I would love to be able to do that. Now I can't for financial reasons as a single parent, but also because I do have a lot of ambition, and I know that when I stay at home, I'm not the best mum. I get a bit cranky, I get a bit restless, and I'm proud that I recognize that in myself. And I know I'm not alone. There are a lot of women out there that are better parents when they're doing something they love on a day-to-day basis and come home fueled with passion and feeling really happy and excited to see their kids at the end of the afternoon. And I know I'm a better mum for it. What that does mean, it means that we have to prioritize the time we do have our children to be really protected. And it can be challenging. You come home, you've got bills to pay. And certainly these days, I have a social media career too. So sometimes I'm sitting there on my phone doing my social media, not because I want to watch what everyone's doing on social media. I like that too at times, but also because my business is online. And that can be tricky for a child who's sitting across the room wanting your attention, and it looks like you're playing on your mobile and not interested. So it's being really sure you communicate that with your children, and with yourself, that you prioritize that one-on-one time to reduce your mother guilt with your children, and you protect that time and that space. And look, sometimes you're going to have to break into it. That is inevitable. But just like you do with work and appointments, being able to really say, Sunday afternoon, 12 till 5, that's my protected family time. And no, I'm not booking any appointments in there. And look, that sounds almost like, well, hang on, you can't diarize your children, but it's making sure that they still have lots of other time with you during the week, but that particular time is protected. And the phones go away and the TVs go off, and you go for a walk and you talk and you be present for them. And so it is tricky. And I do agree there are times in life where you cannot have both. And I came up against that last year. I was in the middle of doing my training as an obstetrician gynae. I was trying to do a PhD at the same time, so research, and I was trying to manage the 6 kids, and it didn't work. And so I had to sit down and go, well, what are my priorities now? I want to finish my training and I want to be present for my kids. Do I really need the research? Why am I doing that? Is it because I want other people to think I'm cleverer than I am? Is it that I have some imposter syndrome around not quite having enough skill? And I think that's something that a lot of women need to look at, is that why are they doing something? If it's because they love their job and they want to do it, fantastic, that's the right reason. Is it because they're trying to impress someone else? Because I know everyone goes, oh, that's not the case, but it often is. Is it trying to impress themselves? Do they not feel good enough on the inside? Is that why they're taking on so many things? And I think as long as you're really honest in that space and you work out what your reasoning is, if it's for the right reasons, it's fantastic to balance with children. If it's for the wrong reasons, I can guarantee in a few years you'll regret it. And so that's where we need to be really open with that conversation. And so I stopped my PhD. And don't get me wrong, I was a bit embarrassed about it and like, oh, it looks like I'm failing. No, I'm not. I'm prioritizing my children and my work, and I can't have it all. Certainly not all at once. Doesn't mean I can't go back to it in a few years where maybe the kids are a bit older and I'm not as popular to them and they want to go hang out with their friends instead of me. That's fine. But I do think, as old-fashioned as it is, we can't always have every goal we want. Perhaps not now, in future, yes, but you do need to really work out and have a deep conversation with yourself around where your priorities lie.
Yeah, for sure. And for you, I just can't even comprehend how you could do all of that in a 24-hour day. So
look, I don't sleep as much as the average bear.
Yeah, right. Yeah. But there are going to be times where it's just not practical, isn't it? Yeah. And
exactly.
as you said, it doesn't mean it's the end. It just means it's a pause.
It's a pause.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I really enjoy that you work with women's health, and I think that's a passion of yours. So your advocacy is a lot around women's health, isn't it? And pelvic floor issues, incontinence issues,
miscarriage, cervical cancer, all of it.
All of it,
yep.
Yeah. So why do you think that some of these conversations are a little bit late to come into the mainstream?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. We are talking about women's private bits that we've hidden for years and years and years. At least breast cancer now does get a bit more of a say in the public and the media, and people are more confident talking about breast screening and breast. But that took a long time too, and it took a lot of very powerful advocates. Like if you think about Glenn McGrath's wife, that was a huge change in the whole way we visualize breast cancer and started talking about it and putting events on to raise awareness and funding for that. Um, but below the belt is always going to have comments, because people we've been notoriously told to cover up and be ashamed of our bodies as women.
Yes.
And so it is tricky to change that narrative. And so that is a huge goal of mine, is to be very open with my body and what it's experienced, because I do want other women to realize it's okay. And even if they're not comfortable talking about it publicly, like, I had a colleague the other day, had to take a day off work, and she put too much information in a messaging chat and then got a bit berated for that. There are times and places where we need to have space for our colleagues and our male counterparts to grow with us with our conversations. But what I want women to be able to do is not be ashamed themselves. And
Yes.
why that's important is I want them to go and see a doctor, go and see a physiotherapist, speak to their female friends about something they're experiencing that perhaps someone else is also going through, and they can have a bit of insight into how they can make that journey a little bit lighter. And that's where those conversations need to head. And by me being a bit over the top and doing it publicly in a forum where there's lots of men and women in the room, I think it helps give permission to people who are a little more quiet about it to gently speak to someone they care about, not necessarily as publicly as me, but at least start having those conversations.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, so I think just you talking about these things out loud is very validating for even maybe some of the listeners to not feel that shame, to not feel that it's something that is taboo or that they need to self silence.
That's
Yeah,
right.
and someone like you that's I think we sometimes pigeonhole people that we think that might be in that category. Oh, they might have leakage because they're a very unfit person, or they're
Yep.
quite sedentary, or they're this or they're that. But we would never say that you're unfit or uneducated,
No.
or not, you haven't got body awareness. So it's good to understand that this can happen to anybody, and that we're not alone in this. Yeah,
Exactly right.
yeah. So bringing it to also like something that's close to my heart at the moment is perimenopause and menopause. It's another big transition in life, isn't it? And I think there's still a lot of self-silencing around this issue. We're slowly starting to get a little bit more awareness out there. But what would you like women to know about this season of their life?
I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It is getting a little bit more public in the way that we're addressing the perimenopause and menopausal symptoms, but um, I think one of the big key messages to come out of it is that it's different for every woman, and that we've got to be brave not to compare ourselves to others. And if we are experiencing significant side effects, realistically, it's time to go and see someone for it. And then the key message out of that was, a lot of women are telling me they go to a GP and they don't get heard. So if you don't get heard the first time, that doesn't mean shut down your concerns. It means go and see somebody else. And slowly we are setting up a lot of more menopause clinics around Australia. So there are definitely, and internationally, but there are definitely people really pushing boundaries in this space. Now, I'm obviously still a training gynecologist at the moment, but there are people who have done this for 20 or 30 years who really know their stuff around the hormonal imbalances and the signs and symptoms of what can be really problematic for women. And there are so many options, but yet the conversation around, for example, menopause or hormonal treatments or therapy, depending on what, it's been named a multitude of things over the years, HRT, and lots of different things around that space. We're all trying to normalize that conversation and put wording into it that makes women feel comfortable. But it all comes down to that there is still so much stigma around saying I'm on hormone replacement therapy. And why is that? Because women are told to tough it out, and that it's just a normal transition in life, and that it'll pass in a few years, so get on with it, suck it up, princess. It's part of being a woman. And I guess that's what's been all of our lives when it comes to menstrual bleeding, when it comes to pain, when it comes to labor pain, all of these things. Women are always being judged because it's a part of normalcy. But you know what? So was dying at 40 years of age because of a bacterial infection 100 years ago, before penicillin was found to be a treatment therapy that would stop bacterial infections. So was dying of a heart attack because you had high cholesterol before statins became around. So there are so many medications now that support us to live longer. And we're really the only creature or mammal in the world that lives beyond our reproductive years. But yet somehow we're told not to take therapy or not to seek help for something that is usually not the case. But it's only medicine that's got us to live longer, but yet we're telling women not to turn to medicine to help them through that transitional stage of life. And so I think that's where the message I like to hear women go, oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. I am living longer because medicine has changed and allows me to. So no, I'm not going to suffer through this. And you know,
Yeah.
there are lots of things we can do from a holistic perspective too. We, as you were talking about before, you know, there's ways of looking at better sleep patterns, there's nutritional aspects, there's dropping weight, there's, you know, people who aren't maybe in the best shape of their life. And this is a wonderful chapter when often kids are a bit older and starting to move out of home and you're pretty settled in life. Hopefully work is settled and, you know, you're at a point in your life where finally you're achieving some of the goals you set out in your 20s and worked so hard for. But I also look at that and think, oh, how unfair is it? You're finally in a great place in your life, and then you get chucked these hormonal things that you have to deal with, and total personality changes, and poor sleep and weight gain. Fabulous, you know. It's like it's
Yes.
constantly being challenged. And so yeah, I think it's about having a conversation with us as women together. Like, what are you experiencing? What are you going through? And what options are there? You know, there are things to help aid sleep. There are things to, you know, I even work with a company these days called Rest that does bedding that helps cool you down at night, and pajamas so that you're not sweating as much. And you know, there's medications that we use for mental health, which are in different doses work for the vasomotor symptoms. But you know, people get told, here, try this medication, and oh no, don't do that because it's for mental health. No, it does both. It's for mental health and your vasomotor symptoms. So it's having women leave the judgment at the door, and remembering that they can have a big ownership of what medications or what they choose to use and not use, and that's okay. And it's also okay, as I said before, to try something and it not work and try something else. Or if a practitioner's not helping you, try another one. Like, we really need women to be an advocate for themselves.
Yeah, no, that's definitely something that I'm kind of living right now. I'm proudly on HRT,
Yeah,
and
good.
and I really think this is a stage of a life where you get to take a bit back of your power, don't you? Like
That's right.
through the young years, children when they're young, and you're going through so much, and it's chaotic, and it can feel very like it's out of control. But this is a time where you get to take back your power,
Yeah.
really lean into the things that you want in life, things that are important, drop the things that aren't. And it's another stage, as is adolescence, becoming a mother.
True.
It's a time to upgrade. It's not a time
Yeah,
to see
I love it.
yourself as a weak person. So I love that. I love that you're also advocating for that area of a woman's life.
And look, I
So
think it's important to say in that, just quickly, because I am a doctor, obviously, is that HRT or MHT is not for everyone. And I think that's why it does need to be guided by someone with experience, because there are certainly women who can't take it if you've had previous stroke, or if you've had DVTs, which is blood clots, or if you've had ovarian cancer in your family. There's lots of things. It does need to be guided by someone. It isn't a magic pill, but it does really help those who are well aware and open and educated, guide them through those years.
yeah, and I'm very fortunate to have a GP who's very aligned. So
That
I
is
think
good.
that's half the battle, isn't it? Finding the
Yeah,
right care providers that are going to provide you with
be
the best
supportive.
care.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, how would you describe the Jana today? Who is she? What inspires her to get up every day and keep doing what she does?
Oh goodness, I'm still chaotic. I still take on far too many things, always, but I am far more settled in who I am as a person. Certainly as a youngster, as I said before, I really worried that I wasn't enough, and that there was. I took on so many extra goals purely to ensure that I felt like I'd done enough with my life, and taken on as many opportunities. Whereas now I don't do anything that I don't want to do, which is nice. I mean, sometimes you do, but you have to. That's part of life. But I try really hard to prioritize the things that are important to the kids and I. Hence, we're now about to move to a rural or regional, not quite rural these days. It's a regional location to have more time together, and set up a little hobby farm, and just take a step back. So people sort of say, what's your big next goal? And it's like, well, my big next goal is to slow down, which is interesting because I don't think I would have ever said that 10 years ago. It would always be, oh, I'm going to do this and I want to achieve this and I'm going to go to this and do that. But don't get me wrong, I still have little ideas that pop into my head. I just have to often silence them. Watching the Winter Olympics, I'm like, oh, maybe I'll start bobsledding again. No, Jana, take a step back. You don't need to do that. Oh, maybe I'll run a marathon. Really? Why do you need to run a marathon? Like, there's always that little niggling personality that I've had my whole life, telling me I should do this and that and take on this and that. And in most cases, if I'm honest with it, I'm like, yeah, that's not going to fit in. And so it's just, that's a huge change that I actually am really proud of, that I'm able to sit down and go, I've still got the restlessness. I just listen to it rather than act on it these days.
I think hindsight is an amazing thing, isn't it? And life experience just to really teach us how we can protect our energy and our priorities
Exactly.
and what's considered as productive.
Yeah.
Because I think the message is often sold that rest and slowing down is not productive, when actually it can be the most productive thing to do in a certain season of life.
That's right, exactly.
How would you like your children to remember you?
Oh, that's tricky.
Question.
That I was always there for them. You know, I guess I'd like my kids to look at me the way I look at my own mother. That I was strong and that I stood up for what was important and advocated for them, but also held them accountable, because that's what my mum did for me. And I want them to learn to be good people. But ultimately, I just want them to feel that they were supported in the decisions they made throughout life. I have really neurodiverse children. They're very different. They're very different from each other. And so it is managing all these different conflicting personalities in a small space sometimes, because we're often in the caravan, because we do that a lot these days too. I guess I just want them to feel like I was present despite how many ambitious things that I took on.
Yeah, love that. That's really very inspiring. What would you like to, if you had the ability to give every mother in the world a gift that she couldn't buy, what would you like that to be?
Probably personal time, and a magic glass of wine that took her mother guilt away, because we all have it. It doesn't matter, even if you're a stay-at-home mum or you work 100 hours a week. We always feel like we're not enough when it comes to our parenting, and that we're not. You know, we could do more. You know, we could be clever, more intelligent to be able to help them with their homework, or a better cook to make more nutritious meals, or calmer when the kid's screaming, or more strict when you want to get them to bed. There is so many. There's not a single mother on the planet that I think feels like they're doing a perfect job. And so sometimes I think it'd just be really nice to be able to have a magic way of making a mum feel like she's just wonderful in the job she's doing, because we're all doing the best that we can.
Yeah. Yeah, and just further to that, I think being able to see the things she is doing so well, as opposed to the things that she feels she is, inverted commas, failing at.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think going back to that question about how we want our children to be remembered, when we really look at the things that we are providing for them, that's the memories that they'll have.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you so much. Is there anything that you'd like to add on this podcast to women? That I have a lot of postpartum women and mothers of varying stages in life. Is there any further messages you'd like to give for them?
Look, probably the only one, and you probably hit the nerve there when you said postpartum women. So this is more for them than anything else. Is that I think one of the hardest transitions is into that postpartum period, because you might have been really successful at your job, your marriage is great, everything, not always great, but going well, and all of a sudden this little baby throws your whole world upside down. And I see so many women in those first few weeks to months after birth. I guess it's pretty similar in menopause as well, but where the whole world changes and you just feel like you're lacking in so many areas, and you can't make the baby settle, and you can't make your hormones settle. And it's a time to reflect that we are all in that same boat. We all went through that. Every single one of us felt incompetent and useless and at wit's end in that chapter. And it's even harder if you came from a career where you did really well and you had control, because there is no control in motherhood. It is all out to the chaos. And I think it's just important to reflect on that they're doing a wonderful job, even when things feel like it's completely out of control.
So true. That is my work. I'm a postpartum doula, so that is predominantly what I do and who I see. And women are so hard on themselves, and
I know.
I was there too. But now that I've got a bit of life experience and I can look back, my gift would be for them to just know that they're doing the best that they can.
Exactly.
So thank you so much for sharing your story so openly. I know that many women will resonate with lots of different areas that we've talked about. Appreciate your time and appreciate you for the work that you do.
I trust that you enjoyed this episode. Postpartum is Forever is a podcast that is focused on honouring the mother. My wish for you is that you feel more aware, less alone, more empowered, and a whole lot kinder to yourself in your mothering. Your support means the world to me, and so I would be grateful if you could follow me on my Instagram page, Postpartum is Forever Podcast, and share this podcast on your socials. Rate and review this podcast on whatever platform you're listening from, and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. Big love.